Hello everyone, I'm Bob Powell, or as my good friend Ed Schultz from Colonial Williamsburg calls me, Crusty Old Horseman. I have been retired 8 years, latterly from the 90-acre Highland Folk Museum here in Scotland. My lifetime and career has been associated with agriculture in different forms, and so, for this short presentation, I've put together a series of random, very random, thoughts or questions regarding working with agricultural collections. For my first couple of slides, I thought that I would reflect on who and what influenced me. This is as much to pose a question about from where will future agricultural curators come from and who will mentor them. As shown, my first slide is entitled, "To work with agricultural collections, you have to know about them, be interested and determined." My associated life began when, age 2, I got my first horse brasses, and I have been obsessed ever since with working horses and farming. Age 14 in 1968, I learned to drive on a Ferguson TE20 tractor, and associated with the soil, the same year I went on my first archaeological dig. I graduated in archaeology because museum opportunities for agriculture were rare. Historic farming was my aim, and in 1979 I even ploughed the archaeological site I was working on. Still determined, by 1982 I became vice chairman of the Peterborough Farm Machinery Preservation Society, and I had enough experience to start on my own agriculturally related museum's career. This slide is self-explanatory. It shows 3 of the great old-school farming mentors that I had. I was very fortunate, for I had the best of mentors, but the question I pose is, where will future mentors come from? I have entitled this slide as "Working" in the sense of curatorial with documented and housed collections, but there's also working in the living history or open-air museums profession. I'm trying here to emphasize the importance of the living history part of the museum's profession. And for here, 3 thoughts. Firstly, where will the experienced staff come from? I was fortunate and had a fulfilling career, working with some great colleagues, not necessarily museum trained, but older people with real agricultural and craft experience. These people have mostly either died or retired without passing on their knowledge and skills. Secondly, how do we encourage young people to be interested and support them? We have to engage with young people through offering family and educational programs at our institutions. However, I also believe that more could be offered through museum studies training. In my time, I found that the professional bodies were too glass case orientated, and even dismissive of living history or open-air museums, where our working with collections practices clashed with their ethics and standards. Thirdly, we need more practical museum staff as much as academic. I belong to the UK Museums Association, unusually in 1987 writing my AMA thesis on keeping livestock in museums. However, by 1993 I had become a member of the Association for Living History, Farm and Agricultural Museums, ALFAM, because it really addressed my needs and interests. And now, similarly, I further support the aspirations of Aima. I said that my thoughts were random, and so, tangible agricultural collections are not just, as I would say tongue-in-cheek, scrap iron. If a zoo's creatures are considered a collection, then so should museum livestock. Here I want to highlight the potential breadth of skills required for an agricultural curator. Livestock not only complement established agricultural collections and activities, but further inform on how they are related. As with working agricultural practices in a museum setting, they require staff with practical knowledge and skills, people who can relate to and strike a balance between both historic and present-day standards and regulations. My question is, do any curatorial programs include such training? And now, a fairly controversial comment, and one that I shall return to. Should we be using historic implements and machinery? Who knows how to use them? They break down. They wear out. Spares are hard to find. Potentially, museum agricultural collections are often threatened through closures, deaccessioning, and lack of knowledge or interest. Who knows who has what? The UK Rural Museums Network surveys are now somewhat dated. Are agricultural working collections properly accessioned in spite of their potential destruction? Worn out or broken, they still may be unique or rare and worthy of exhibition after use. And now, further controversy. Why not tractors and associated machinery? Some years ago, I realized that visiting farm folk increasingly did not know what the horse-era implements on view were. And yet they strained to see the two everyday working 1960s Massey Ferguson 135 tractors that we tried to keep out of public view. This year, then, for the Alfam virtual ploughing match, we added a tractor category, but sadly nobody entered. Therefore, leaving aside environmental issues, tractors have been on farms for over 100 years. They exist in museums' collections. As observed, knowledge of older farming culture has waned, but tractors still engender nostalgia and interest, especially now for the 1960s, 1970s and 1980s. Older tractors are still associated with skills to use them, skills that still may be lost. My question then is, are rural museums too stuck in the pre-combustion engine periods associated with the nostalgia of the time from when they were founded, and therefore they do not truly represent agricultural history as a whole? Until now, I'd never considered this question. Is museum development a threat to agricultural interpretation and collections? When I started at the 90-acre Highland Folk Museum in 1997, we grew oats, barley, turnips, potatoes and hay, and had a Clydesdale horse, beef shorthorn cattle, black-faced sheep and poultry. As we, or I, added more buildings, it diminished the farmland. Even the 2013 AMFASCA Collections and Research Facility that protects the agricultural collections wiped out a field. Now, other than token sheep and seasonal borrowed Highland cattle, there is no farming or agricultural equipment in use. And so, mixing a horseplough, a 1960s tractor and school children to plant potatoes, but, and back to, must we use historic artifacts for work? Are there modern alternatives that can still do the job and yet fulfill interpretation whilst protecting historic collections? And for my final random thought, a question about the way forward. We have potential opportunities to engage with new audiences by relating our sometimes vulnerable historic collections and sites to sustainable agriculture, food production, and a greener environment. For example, exhibit historic items, but consider preserving them by using comparative modern implements such as the Cassine multi-tool that includes plows and cultivators. Such implements still demonstrate the same processes and skills and may be used for hands-on activities, including educational programs. We should have greater international cooperation and be less isolated in our outlook, as we have more in common regarding our tangible and intangible culture than our perceived differences. We should also engage in new activities and initiatives, such as Klaus Kropp's recent Draft Animals Conference, or his new A Year on the Field project that brings us from across the world and all aspects of our agricultural heritage and future together. Thank you.